Hello, and welcome to this bonus episode of the WorkWise for Screen podcast. It's part of a growing collection of practical resources and guidance designed for professionals in the screen industries, supported by the BFI awarding national lottery funding.
Through these podcasts, live events, and our online community, we help our screen sector better look after all the people their businesses depend on and stay on safe, legal ground. Our guests share practical ways to improve working conditions and well-being across the industry.
I'm Tacita Small, founder of the Small HR Company, supporting HR in the entertainment industry.
And I'm Keith Arrowsmith, a creative industries solicitor and programme director for WorkWise for Screen.
This episode is a highlight from our live Belfast event, moderated by Brian Henry Martin. He was joined by Marcus Ryder, CEO of the film and TV charity, Mairéad Regan, the HR consultant, Leanne Murphy, employment and equality solicitor at Rosemary Connolly Solicitors, and Michelle Walsh, head of production at Stellify Media. So today's episode is all about fair and accommodated hiring processes.
We'll hear from Mairéad Regan, former HR director at UTV Media and a coach with Screen Skills UK. She tells us all about what's working, what needs to change, and how we can all contribute to a healthier, fairer industry.
I've been working as a self-employed HR consultant all with small businesses, single owners, medium-sized businesses, but also I'm working as an executive coach, and I work as a coach with Screen Skills UK, with obviously freelancers working across UK, and with a woman in film and television mentoring scheme. I've been the coach on that for 6 years. So I've actually been seeing these HR practices from both sides, from the employer's point of view. And an employer, yes, UTV had HR teams, had budgets, had resources, but in the last 7 years, it's people who don't have access to either the budgets or the HR advice and guidance, but also the people who, as Marcus outlined this morning, are dealing with dreadful circumstances in the industry at the moment. I was coaching somebody yesterday who hasn't worked for 2 years as a head of production, and all the issues that come with that in terms of finances and mental health. It's about getting the fundamentals right, and it's actually about upfront, even before you go out to look for a resource, taking stock and pausing, because there is an inclination to say, well, we had somebody in the role of producer, so we'll just fill that role. Is that actually the role that you need? And is that role, the way you have described it and set the expectations for that role, right? Because the roles change and move on, and with mobility and changing requirements. So first of all, you need to reflect the job description and say, is that accurate? More and more, you need to ensure that it's no longer a single channel in which you go out to find people. Companies have tended to use maybe a recruitment agency and keep going back to that recruitment agency. Expand that. Look at your social media resources. Look at LinkedIn. Look at alternative means of ensuring that you are getting the widest possible applicant pool. But actually, one of the key areas is in the actual selection process. So once you've shortlisted and you're bringing people forward, let's make that interview process as realistic and a genuine true reflection on what is going to be asked of that individual. So are there simulated tasks that they can do as part of that? And in terms of the interviewing, making sure that you have, for two reasons, and Leanne no doubt will say this, for safety and protection reasons, that you have two people on the panel, but because then there's notes taken and it's a very safe and proper process. But also, you're not recruiting purely to kind of your unconscious bias, that there are other views in the room in terms of who actually would be the best fit. So it's ensuring that those sorts of things are in place, the fundamentals are in place. And then it's looking at using the probation period. And I'll probably come back, touch on this. To me, the probation period is one of the key things in terms of, have you got the right person? In terms of, it may be, yes, their skills, but what's their fit like? What's their contribution? So it's in its broadest sense, but also ensuring that you have the environment which is completely open. And it touches on some of the things that Marcus was raising here, that It is dreadful to think that there are people and I know this firsthand from the coaching, that there are people so desperate to work that they are working in environments that they were saying, if I had a choice, I wouldn't work here because of what I'm experiencing, but I can't speak up. Because if I speak up, I'm not going to get the next job. So as employers and as people who are taking on, it's so important that the right environment and culture is created, that people feel it is safe to speak up and that they will be listened to, and if possible, something will be done.
And how do we make roles more suitable for those with outside responsibilities, whether they be parenting or caring?
Yeah. And Marcus flagged this towards the end of his presentation, that we're at real risk of losing people with care and responsibilities. And again, I've had exposure to that with a number of the people that I'm coaching. It's about, how do I get out of this industry? What are my transferable skills? I need a job where there is flexible working. So if we want to keep individuals with caring responsibilities in the workforce, we have to look at, and we have to be very open to considering things like flexible working and adaptive management. And just to sort of break that, what does that actually mean? It is, can you offer remote roles on a remote basis? And if that isn't practical, can it be done in hybrid to allow people to have a bit more flexibility? Are there opportunities for job share? And I've seen people work in costume work in jobs. I have seen where you would see traditional roles maybe not work, or that you would presume they wouldn't. I have seen them work. Adaptive management in terms of, can you, yes, agree core hours, but be flexible enough and trust staff enough to allow them to come in at staggered, later mornings, leave later, start later, whatever it is that accommodates their needs. Because if you can facilitate that, you're going to get that will be reflected in that person's loyalty to you, because they will want to continue working. Now, I think I would say to most people is, and COVID taught us this. In COVID, when, I'm a coach, and part and parcel of mine is, I have to go out and meet the person and meet them and have a cup of coffee and build a relationship. And I thought, this will never work on Zoom. And it absolutely works incredibly well on Zoom. I still prefer to meet people in person for the first one anyway. And I think that in terms of looking at these flexible ways of working, if we can be prepared to offer a pilot or on a trial basis. So you say to the employee, look, we'll commit to this for 6 months on a trial basis to see if it works for us and if it works for you. If it does work, we will confirm that. If it doesn't, we'll have a conversation. And it's all about being prepared to try. And again, it goes back to creating a culture where people feel they are listened to and they're encouraged. They're encouraged to speak up. So if people are in fear of speaking up, it's up to us as managers and business owners to provide the forums where that feedback can happen, be it your one-to-one meetings, be it your team meetings, ensuring that you're saying to people, come and talk to me. If I don't know their issues, there's nothing I can do about it, and you may choose to leave because that hasn't been addressed. Talk to us and we will try and accommodate them.
Now, let's just talk about companies for a moment. What kind of initiatives do you think companies can implement to make themselves more attractive to underrepresented groups?
Again, going back to basics, I think we need to look at, first of all, the companies themselves internally. What are they doing? And this goes back to things like diversity and inclusion training to ensure that everybody in the organisation, in the company, accepts that they have a responsibility and that they are creating an environment which is welcoming to all parts of the community. Ensuring that recruitment and selection also takes into consideration inclusion. So rather than going necessarily simply to your typical resource outlets like recruitment agencies or LinkedIn, are there other areas you could be tapping into? Something like gritty talent. In the UK, I was speaking to their chief executive, who was basically saying they haven't done a lot of work in Northern Ireland. They are there as a body to represent talent in underrepresented groups, but reaching out to and making partnerships with companies like that, offering placements, offering mentorships, looking at who else is doing what, Andrew's not here, but Northern Ireland Screens Cine programme, Belfast Film, they run an inclusion programme. Who else is doing what? And because this is about ensuring that internally the environment is right, your policies reflect that. Also ensuring that your content on media, on all your social media channels reflects that you fully embrace and you're fully inclusive. So the message goes out to the marketplace. But then making sure you're out in places where you will get access to, you can do all that lovely stuff and it doesn't change anything. So you need to ensure that you're represented in networks and forums and organizations that are explicitly reaching out and including across the divides.
Now, we may have small companies in the room here. So in terms of small companies with limited resources, how do they ensure good HR practices?
We're actually very fortunate in Northern Ireland because there are a lot of free resources. I think WorkWise is fantastic because a lot of the free resources are about HR in general. There are so many nuances and particular issues in terms of the creative industries. But first of all, looking internally, irrespective of your size, it is so important that you have the fundamentals in place. So you have your HR policies and procedures to ensure that everyone who works with you understands. And this is even if you're a 1-person, 2-person, it's so important to have those in place and to have those practices in place, like the probation process, the onboarding process. And that training is provided. The reality is no matter how good your policies are and your practices are, you are going to bump up. And as a small business, where can you go? Some people will have access to and will outsource their HR to, there are small companies who provide that service. There are others who will go through their solicitor. But there are free resources, and I'll refer people to, you may be aware of, for example, the LRA has an employment toolkit. Northern Ireland Business also has an online resource, which these resources all have policy templates, sample letters, training material. The Equality Commission, there's online free training resources. LRA, online free training resources. I've also now started to use, and I find this very good, Perspective AI is fantastic, not for the legal nuances, but I would like a job description for a da-da-da-da, and it starts with, and AI has a role to play, but what I absolutely would say to employers is where you are facing a challenge, please do reach out to any legal advice that you can get, because if you think as a small employer that this can be easily resolved and you try to resolve it without checking the legal circumstance, you can end up in incredibly difficult, incredibly time-consuming and incredibly costly processes. So, and as an example, I've been involved with 3 companies in the last year who were dealing with individuals who were on probation. And you would think, oh, probation's fine. You can get rid of people during probation or whatever. Those 3 different scenarios have all taken a life of their own in terms of actions that the employer took with the best intentions, but has kind of been blown out, and it's become a lengthy process. And none of us have time. We want to focus on the work that our company's doing and our current employees, not necessarily on people who have left us. So I absolutely, and I know there's but that's going to be really costly. The cost up front of seeking legal advice early is a huge saving in the longer term.
Now, just finally and briefly, WorkWise for Screen. What's your impression of the resource which is available here?
I think this is amazing. I think it is something that's going to grow. I think a hub like this, there are other hubs in other sectors in Northern Ireland. We don't have this. But I think one of the strongest things of it will be the network. You mentioned it yourself. I have seen, for example, a Women in Film and Television network that I align in. Everyone helps each other out. You will not be the only company who's experiencing what you're going through, but this is a resource that will continue to be added to. And everybody here in this room has an opportunity to add to it by saying, here's the material that we would like.
I think that was so refreshing to hear. Someone who's championing the fact that due to our industry and our ways of working, we could actually be more adaptable and introduce more flex for those that need it, because our hours are, not traditional 9 to 5. Our locations and places of work are not traditional offices. So it's kind of weird to sometimes come across having a super flexible situation that is trying to force fit a rigid structure of working ways or working hours into that. I'd love to see more around how we can flex, how we can, have job shares, how we can have different start times and work times, and just introduce more of that. That will open up the industry a lot more, get people back, and also help people to stay.
I think we've got that balance between tight deadlines, tight budgets. But Mairead's point is that there's always going to be a tight budget. There's always going to be a tight timescale. So let's find a way of working that supports people to help you meet those really tight timetables and allow them to have a way of working with you and also meeting their caring responsibilities or whatever else that they need to factor into their day-to-day existence.
We have all the ingredients for a great recipe of what it could be. And there's something sometimes that's always stopping us from just taking that extra leap, that extra step forward into this space of, okay, how can we help people to work flexibly on our productions?
There's something also about making sure that flexibility is in place right at the beginning. So taking stock when we're thinking about who do we need to be part of this team, and making sure that we're doing our bit to having an open process so that it's not just the same people we work with all the time who might not be appropriate for a particular role, for a particular project. And also making sure that we have some help. So, 2 people having a conversation with a potential new recruit. But Mairead also said, make those questions real. Have a sense of linking that process to the role. And if it means, a bit more practical element of the selection process, well, that's great. If it's a role that demands really good Excel spreadsheet skills, well, let's talk about that rather than something that's too generic to give you insufficient information to make a good decision on whether to hire someone.
Yeah. Having those great, transparent, open conversations around the role and what the expectations are of the role helps you to find the great talent, or the great talent rises to the top.
Yeah, it feels as though Mairead's advice to give it a try, make sure you've got the right feedback at the right time and allow sufficient time and budget to change what's needed to keep it relevant is a really helpful way to go.
Yeah. And I think that, if you're not sure, have a look at some resources. We've got some on the WorkWise, website. I'd encourage you to get some support on doing that.
Yeah. If you're not sure, that's where having some mentors or being part of a network or sharing some information at that early stage you can test it out to make sure it's right before you commit to it. Thanks for listening to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, supported by the BFI awarding National Lottery funding.
Our online platform provides lots of easy to understand information and invites to our events. Visit our website at workwiseforscreen.org.uk and register for the latest updates.
Please follow us on social media and join in this crucial conversation.
And contact us with suggestions for future episodes, or if you can support the programme in any other way.